The Allen Lund Company continues to support the owner-operators of OOIDA. Thank you for what you do, and stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
Members of the OOIDA Board of Directors play a vital role in fighting for the rights of truck drivers in their home states. We sit down today with Ken Becker, who recently met with the Texas Freight Advisory Committee to discuss important issues such as truck parking. From tornadoes to heavy trucks, June's Landline magazine explores some of the biggest dangers you need to be aware of, including a recent scam that's very convincing. Ashley Blackford speaks with Mark Schremer and Tyson Fisher of the magazine's staff. And finally, normally an NTSB report on a wreck details some regulatory change or new technology that the board thinks is needed in order to prevent a similar crash in the future. But a recent report instead highlighted the need for more truck parking. I'll talk with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today, a new bill referred to as Connors Law would codify President Trump's executive order that requires CDL holders to communicate English well enough to operate safely. Connors Law refers to Connor DeZion, who died at the age of 18 in a crash involving a tractor trailer. A separate accident caused DeZion to be stuck in traffic for about an hour when a truck driver crashed into a line of stopped vehicles. The truck driver was said to be unable to read English and reportedly passed signs set up by Florida law enforcement, warning of the crash ahead. The House bill was introduced by Congressman Dave Taylor of Ohio. In a statement, he said tragic deaths like Connor's are absolutely preventable, and it starts with ensuring drivers operating large and heavy commercial vehicles are capable of being alerted to hazards and updates on the road. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association supports Taylor's bill. Association President Todd Spencer said basic English skills are essential for reading critical road signs, understanding emergency instructions, and interacting with law enforcement. It's the same message Spencer delivered at an event last month in Austin, Texas, alongside Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, dedicated to the English proficiency issue.
This is a good day for truckers, it's a good day for families, and it's a good day for common sense. Out on the road, there's no margin for error. Truckers drive 80,000-pound vehicles through all kinds of terrain, steep mountain passes, narrow turns, busy city streets. The only thing that's separating safe trips from deadly ones can be a simple road sign. These signs aren't suggestions, they're warnings. They save lives, but only if they're understood. That's why English proficiency behind the wheel isn't some bureaucratic requirement. It's a life and death safety standard. Truckers must be able to read road signs, communicate with law enforcement, and respond in emergencies. When that doesn't happen, people get hurt or worse. But for nearly a decade, enforcement of this requirement was gutted. The result, safety violations didn't go away, they just stopped being tracked. OOIDA is advocating for returning English proficiency to the list of serious violations, and we've been calling on federal regulators to restore accountability and focus on real safety. And now, because of this administration's leadership, that's exactly what's happening.
Secretary Duffy echoed that sentiment during his address.
So federal law has always been very clear. Commercial drivers must be proficient in English. English is the language of opportunity in America. Allowing drivers who cannot read stop signs or understand police officers' instructions to operate an 80,000-pound big rig threatens the safety of every American on our roadways. There's numerous examples across the country where we've had people who are operating this kind of equipment who can't speak the language, and the results have been devastating and have taken the lives of so many American families. That's going to end right now. Instead, we are issuing new guidance that ensures a driver who can't understand English will not drive a commercial vehicle in this country. Period. Full stop.
In April, President Trump issued an executive order related to English proficiency. Shortly after that, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, at OOIDA's urging, voted to put English proficiency requirements back into its out-of-service criteria. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration putting the word out on 2 new recalls affecting commercial trucks. The first is for more than 21,000 Daimler trucks. NHTSA says a battery connection was incorrectly installed in a number of Western Star 49X trucks, model year 2020 through 2026. Some Western Star 47X vehicles, model years 2021 through 2026, are also getting the recall treatment. The issue could lead to a short circuit. NHTSA says a fix is in the works. Meanwhile, more than 200 Volvo VN trucks, model years 2025 and 26, are also being recalled over a separate issue. It's related to improperly routed power cables, which can cause a fire. Dealers will reroute the power cables free of charge. Owner notification letters go out in July. If you've got questions or concerns about either recall, contact your dealer. Sales of new and used Class 8 trucks remain strong. Ward's Intelligence says more than 18,000 Class 8 trucks were reported sold in April, down ever so slightly from the previous month. Used truck sales also strong that month. ACT Research says the numbers were up in April, compared both to March and the previous year. The average price was up 4% and the average miles dipped 3%, trends that typically benefit buyers. Lawsuit reform is one step closer to reality in Texas. The bill is related to inflated medical costs or phantom damages, which Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has identified as one of his legislative priorities. House lawmakers in Austin approved an amended version of the bill last week. It specifies that those who sue in personal injury or wrongful death cases can submit only the amount actually paid for medical services, not the sticker price. At a recent House committee hearing, OOIDA board member Danny Schnautz, president of Clark Freight Lines in Pasadena, Texas, said the state is headed in the wrong direction with nuclear verdicts. He pointed out that in 2023, 6 of the top 10 verdicts in the country were handed down in Texas, with outcomes totaling more than $200 million. The Texas Trucking Association also supports the effort, telling lawmakers that small businesses are closing their doors daily due to the lawsuit abuse. The bill now heads back to the Senate for approval of changes. If approved there, the lawsuit reform bill would head to the governor's desk. The results are in from this weekend's Shell Rotella Super Rigs in Atlanta. Kenny Ziegler II of Rawlins, Wyoming, captured Best of Show honors with his 2007 Peterbilt 379, nicknamed Scrapin' By. He was awarded $10,000 for that and also picked up second-place honors in the Best Lights category. In all, more than $25,000 in cash and prizes was handed out, and 12 drivers were picked to have their trucks featured in the 2026 Shell Rotella Super Rigs calendar. OOIDA President Todd Spencer will be honored at this week's ATHS Convention and Truck Show in Madison, Wisconsin. Spencer will be one of 9 people presented with the Golden Achievement Award, which recognizes people who have been involved in trucking for 50 or more consecutive years and represent excellence, leadership, and service in the trucking industry. In announcing the honor, the American Truck Historical Society describes Spencer as a stalwart advocate for America's independent truckers. Around 1,000 historic and modern trucks are expected to be on display at this year's ATHS Convention and Truck Show. That's in addition to educational presentations, hands-on demonstrations, historical sessions, a light show, and the ATHS Awards Banquet. The show runs for 3 days, starting on Thursday. And finally, Love's Travel Stops is making good on its promise to remodel locations around the country. The company said in a social media post that 7 truck stops have undergone upgrades since the start of the year. That includes expanded restrooms, upgraded showers, and improved laundry facilities. Love's plans to begin construction on 20 new stores this year and remodel about 50 existing locations. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Alan B. Kitzhaber of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 34 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 255 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rotella. Next, Ashley Blackford discusses truck parking and more with OOIDA board member Ken Becker. We'll be back in just a moment with more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
High heat and low lubricity can break your diesel fuel down fast. Summer driving means crowded roads, more stress, dust, and a bigger risk of costly engine damage. How's Diesel Defender protects from the inside out, cleaning, lubricating, and fighting injector wear. Visit howsproducts.com.
With rising costs affecting everyone, switching to a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper can help you avoid expensive repairs and downtime. Save money and keep your truck running smooth with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Landline Now, welcome back. Ken Becker joins me now. He has been trucking since the mid-'70s and is an OOIDA board member. Ken, when did you first join the association?
Let's see, that would be 31 years now. I think I first in 1994.
Okay. And when did the idea to join the board, get on the board, when did that happen?
Well, I talked to Sylvia about some insurance things at that time because I had my insurance, OOIDA, and she said, you ought to run for the board. And that seemed like a activity that I'd be interested in, being proactive with the association and what was going on, because you could read what we did in the Landline magazine, but I wanted to be a part of it, so I applied.
Now, I'm curious, obviously, back in 94, we didn't have, Facebook and social media and all this stuff. How did you hear about OOIDA?
Magazines in the truck stop. Honestly, that's where I saw it and read a deal, and then I first called in 94. That's when I became a member because I needed some help with an unscrupulous carrier in Oklahoma, and they did what we could, and I saw what work was being done. I thought it was a good thing, so that's when that's part of also why I applied for the board.
What was it that made you decide that you wanted to get into trucking and make it a career?
Well, I was always fascinated with driving the truck when we were just driving whatever it was for a wheat harvest or hauling hay. Driving a truck worked for a hay farmer up in Kansas and drove his truck. Of course, I always felt I was capable of operating any kind of machinery. So I did a lot of work in the oil field, and a lot of that pertained to going to a truck stop and calling reports into the office. So there's always a plethora of trucks and all kinds of trucking information, hanging up in a roller dial that you could read. And things kind of changed with the oil field, and I'm like, you know what? I've done this for a long time. I'm going to try something just completely different, and borrowed the money and bought my own truck.
Wow.
So I had 2 notes at the time. But it did well, so I continued on.
What have you hauled over the years?
I guess first I was hauling pneumatic when I was leased on with this company. I hauled a pneumatic, and then I ended up buying my own walking floor. Had my walking floor for a while, then I decided to go change directions, so I got rid of my walking floor. Well, I was pulling my boss's walking floor, so I bought me a reefer, and I went out there and did refrigerator work for quite a while. And when I was working for a company there in Okeen, Oklahoma, we had pneumatics hauling flour, and we had dry vans hauling flour, and we had hopper bottoms hauling grain commodities, and we had walking floors. So I did all those, so I thought, well, I'm going to try a reefer. And I enjoyed that, but, bumping them docks in some of these cities, it's like, oh, man, terrible. Mm-hmm. After that, a few years, I'm like, I'm going to trade my reefer off and go back in the walking floor business because you just deal with farmers and ranchers and milkers and not people in the city.
Yeah. You prefer that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did that for quite a long while, and things kind of got rough with the fuel, and so I thought, well, I can't necessarily pay for all my bills. I better go get me a job. So this is what people have to do sometimes. You got to go get a job. Wasn't doing well trying to pay for a truck and a trailer when the fuel prices had doubled, in less than a year. But the rates dang sure didn't double.
Now, you're in Texas now. Have you always been in Texas, or?
No, I'm originally from northwest Oklahoma. I moved to Texas in 2002.
Oh, wow. Yes,
my wife was a truck broker, and I met her through a board member. He was friends with my wife's boss at the time. He said, here's some numbers. And then one of the numbers was hers. Oh, and wow. I was hauling a load to a guy out of Abilene, and he'd double brokered a load on me. And I saw Elizabeth Thomas Flyers. I get my paperwork out. Well, hell, there's her number right there. So I called her up right then and there, and I says, Joe's double brokering this load. She says, well, don't call him, call me. And then we got a good working relationship. And she said she was going through a divorce. I was going through a divorce. She says, when you're down here in Texas, come by. I'll set you up with a sweet glass of iced tea. And the first chance I got to run by her house in Montgomery, I did.
Wow.
And the rest they say is history.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's a great story. Wow. Now, you, of course, represent OOIDA, not just obviously as a member, but on the board. You recently went to the Texas Freight Mobility Plan meeting. Talk to me about what that was.
Well, it's TxDOT, Texas DOT, and they got a plan they go on. It's Texas 2050, but it's the Freight Advisory Committee is what it is. There's different committees underneath the Texas DOT, and we're under as Texas Freight. So a young man with Texas DOT had met Louis and talked to him, and Louis said, they were putting this Freight Advisory Committee together, and Louis gave him my name and Danny's name, Danny Schnauz. Mm-hmm. And that's how I was supposed to go last fall, but they the emails weren't up to date, and they says, are you going to be able to make it to the meeting? And I says, well, when's the meeting? You never have got back with me. He says, well, it's this afternoon.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm in Kansas City. I don't think I can make it. She says, well, his partner, Leah, she said, well, all right, we'll keep up with you and make sure you can make it to the spring meeting. So we were just there the 7th. Nice.
There was a few things on the agenda. What stood out to you for as far as what was discussed?
Well, it's interesting, the whole aspect of it. But one of the presentation was truck parking actions plan summary, far west and southeast. So they talked about their plans, and they talked about trying to get some what they call right-of-way. It's land that Texas DOT owns, and they're, say a rest area along the interstate is the right-of-way. They refer to those as right-of-way, parking areas. And I guess that's a good thing to call them. I wasn't aware of how they refer to them, but they showed some areas that they're getting putting some parking in off some right-of-way areas. There wasn't down there at, like I was telling you, we were on a tight schedule, so there was very little discussion about the presentations. I mean,
yeah, it looked like a short meeting and a lot in the meeting.
Yes. They're looking for trying to find some parking right-of-way places along different areas around the state of Texas. Now, state of Texas, I will say they've done a great job of building rest areas, and they'll have rest areas with like 50 truck parking areas in there. There's 2 of these areas between Dallas and Houston, which is great. And they're looking at some more right-of-way parking, and they were talking about the congestion, what their plans are for some corridors in Texas to alleviate some of the traffic, which will help with parking. Mm-hmm. And some of the members on there were talking about need more of a public-private get-together to come up with some public parking. Mm-hmm. And I found the city of Houston doesn't have any public parking area for trucks specifically in the city of Houston. So they're thinking, well, we need to find out where there might be. We talked to some areas that people knew from the various members on the committee, of the open areas that they knew of around Houston and Dallas, and they talked about some DOT land down there at Freeport, Texas, that they're opening up. Just supposed to be like 33 parking spaces, but that's 33 more than what we have now.
Yeah, exactly.
And the numbers there. There's one parking place for every 11 trucks out there.
Yeah.
Another one's Angleton, another site at Angleton. It's supposed to have another 30 parking places put there. So those places are kind of close in the areas of some of the ports, But they're all, like I said, they're looking for other areas, and they have the wireless program that they have where they're wanting to put on real time the signage on the highway. Yeah. So if you're driving down the interstate and it says There's 10 parking places up ahead at the rest area that they want to prove upon that to be inaccurate. And they want to include these other right-of-way parking areas with that same configuration. So they want to make it accurate. So truck drivers down the road, so there's 40 parking places, like I need a place to park, up the road a few miles, you can pull in there and find a parking place, not just pull in there and there's nothing there.
Yep.
Or go in there if it's already full,
Yeah.
Of course, truckers will still do that because they're trying to find a place late at night.
Yep. Now, there was you and then Danny Schnautz, who's also an OOIDA board member. He was kind of there representing kind of the business standpoint, but you were there representing OOIDA kind of on the federal level. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, Danny, of course, Danny has a business there at Deer Park, Texas, and of course he talked, he brought up his concerns around Houston, but, we got a large group of things that we got on the federal level that they just sent Colin Long, our D.C. guy, sent to the representatives, all the representatives on the Hill, and that's what I discussed. What we were looking at, what I'm looking at, OOIDA is looking at on the federal level. But by all means, that concerns every state, especially the state of Texas, where we was talking. So I was going over the areas, truck parking being the top of our list right now.
How do you gauge, on this committee, the people that are here, as far as how much knowledge they have on trucking and like the need for truck parking?
So, basically everybody's aware with the truck parking situation, and I'm glad to see Texas is so proactive about the situation, especially when you think of the numbers. The Port of Houston individual that was there said there's 16,500 containers come out of Houston every day.
Wow.
It's the biggest port in the nation. Now, I didn't think it would be, but it is. And it's the 5th out of the top 10 in the number of containers moved out of that port. So, yes, the public-private sector needs to work together, about alleviating some of this problem. Now, we're looking at the bill, going through the House, and it's only $750 million, but it's a start, to help in some areas.
Yep.
Around of freight moving through Texas is just astonishing, Of course, one thing about it, though, in Texas, it's a lot more open. It's not the congestion of the bigger cities that just like the East Coast, all up and down the East Coast. It's city all the way from Florida up to Maine, it seems like.
Yeah. Lastly, I just want to ask you about, when it comes to advocacy, how important is that to you?
Well, have to understand there is a problem. It's not severe, but, sometimes people think problem. Well, they raise their eyebrows when you say the word problem. Well, we have a problem. We got to advocate, as OOIDA does, for the truck drivers, our dear members, but we advocate for every driver in the United States of America. It's very important that somebody can work with the powers that be that can move mountains, which it takes a long time to move a mountain, but sometimes that's the only way you get anything done.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight. So trying to get people to advocate also as the member level to say, call your congressman, write your local town council, anything. If you're you need to park your truck, well, you got to go home. You have to have a place to park. So it's all relative, when we advocate for the truck parking issue.
All right. Ken, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, and I appreciate you, taking the time to stand up for the things that I know are important for the trucking industry. So,
and I look forward to more meetings with the TxDOT Freight Advocacy Committee.
For sure. Yeah. Keep us up to date. So, all
yes,
right.
ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was OOIDA board member Ken Becker talking about how he got his start and his advocacy work with the Texas Freight Advisory Committee. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Landline now, welcome back. We are into the month of June, and that means it's time to talk about a new issue of Landline Magazine. Associate Editor Tyson Fisher and Senior Editor Mark Schrimmer join me now. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Tyson, I want to start with you. You touched on an interesting topic that was on weather and what truckers should do if they find themselves in the midst of a storm.
Yeah, this is kind of an update to a story that I wrote about 10 years ago. Kind of see on a similar topic. Where are there shelters along the interstates? So, most truck drivers are on the interstates. That's where you're going to encounter a lot of storms. So, if you find yourself, you're driving in especially like a rural part of the interstate, and there's this major storm, what do you do? And then 10 years ago, I kind of reached out to various state DOTs, within the tornado alleys, what it's called, and back then. There was only 2 states that had publicly owned storm shelters, specifically storm shelters, and that was Texas and Kansas. And so in 2016, Texas had 19 storm shelters. There was usually within the rest areas. They had like separate rooms specifically for it to shelter in. And Kansas had 30, and they had one at each of their toll plazas. So kind of revisit that. It's like, what was the situation now? And it hasn't changed much. It actually, in some cases, it got worse. So, and it's still just 2 states. It's Texas and Kansas. In Texas, they upped it to 30, so from 19 to 30. And so, like a couple of years ago, they had a big renovation program for their service areas. And in that renovations was to include these storm shelters. They're really cool storm shelters. And one of those was actually just recently used a couple of weeks ago. There was like a tornado that was headed towards this rest area, and the people who were there were in the storm shelter, what it was designed for. Kansas, however, again, 2016, there was 30. Now there's only 6. And the reason why is because since then, Kansas has gone to cashless tolling. So all those toll plazas are gone. And then therefore, so are the storm shelters. And so when it comes to like, what do you do, pretty much there isn't anywhere you can go on the interstate. I mean, the most you can really do, and this is so I talked to a couple people at the National Weather Service, and they said, first of all, just stay vigilant on what the weather forecast is, just kind of look for, what the severe weather is going to be. If you can see, and it's nowadays we have all these weather apps. Your phones notify you. I know we all get, the National Weather Service will send you alerts to your phone, similar to those Amber alerts, those the really annoying sound that we get. But they'll let you know when there's like severe weather or even a tornado warning. So when you get those warnings, the advice is just to pull off the highway and kind of seek shelter, whether it's a truck stop or anywhere. Churches usually will let you in. There's various places you can go to. But in the event that you find yourself, you can't go anywhere and you just have to pull over the side of the road and you do see like a tornado or something like that, what do you do? And the only thing you can do is get out of your truck and lay low on the ground. That is the advice you can get. Yeah. Not exactly ideal, but that's pretty much all you can do. The one thing that Texas DOT said not to do is to go under a bridge. So there used to be like this common wisdom to go under a bridge or to find like a sturdy structure and seek shelter in there. You don't want to do that because tornadoes can take down a bridge pretty easily. And so the general takeaway here is that find a sturdy structure is the first thing to do. Find a sturdy structure. If you can't find a sturdy structure, then you go lay low. If the low area is flooded, which could be the case, then the worst case scenario is just to get inside your truck and then hope for the best.
Buckle up.
Pretty much. But, truck drivers are in a unique position because you're supposed to go in your vehicle and lay low in the vehicle to stay away from the windows that will, smash with the high winds. Truckers have an advantage because of the sleeper cab, so just, hunker in your sleeper cab. But, I mean, the thing that's worth noting is that most rest areas have a building of some sort. That is a sturdy structure. Worst case scenario, find the nearest rest area and that will work. But I mean, yeah, there's this there was a viral video that went out a couple weeks ago of two tractor trailers driving into a tornado. I don't know if you guys have seen this. So when I was talking to the people at the National Weather Service, that wasn't one of the recommended things to do, is to drive into a tornado. And so, when you see a menacing storm, and this was the pretty enlightening thing that I found out, was that the weather experts say that just because you have weathered one storm doesn't mean you'll make it through another. Each storm is unique. So if, a couple days ago, you drove through a really bad hailstorm, you made it through successfully, all right, good for you. But if tomorrow you come across a similar storm, there's no guarantees it's going to have the same patterns. There's no guarantees that there won't be a tornado. So just don't be too confident that you'll make it through any individual storm. Kind of prepare for the worst, and then just pull over, find a safe place. Don't try to be a hero and go through a severe storm.
Yeah, it's a really scary situation for truck drivers. This topic kind of hits close home to me. I grew up about a half an hour away from Joplin, Missouri, and if anybody remembers, 2011 they had a terrible tornado there. I think there was recently a Netflix documentary that they just came out about that, and it's. To think that that they don't have anything in Missouri after that, and there's also been devastating tornadoes in Oklahoma, and for growing up where I did, everybody you have a basement, you do all of these things, and these truck drivers are very vulnerable going through this. But you would just think that all of these different events that we've had over the last decade or so would make this, a push to have more accessible, safe shelters for anyone for these sort of situations. And hearing that Kansas has actually pulled back on it is definitely frustrating. But yeah, the key is, I guess, that information. Don't ignore those annoying sounds of those warnings, as Tyson mentioned, and really look at that forecast every day, especially this time of year, that springtime or whatever, when it's those conditions are very likely, in Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, those kind of prime states. But we've seen them in Alabama and some other places too that have had some tornadoes and different areas too. So definitely be vigilant, going across those areas.
Switching from the dangers of storms, let's talk about the danger of bigger trucks. Mark, I know you wrote about this, a recent study that talked about the impact that bigger trucks would have on bridges.
Yeah, and I'm starting to realize that this issue has got a lot of, dangerous stuff that we're talking about.
It's a dangerous segment.
And so one of the things that stood out to me with this, we've talked about this issue of OOIDA and a lot of people being against the idea of increasing the weight limits and the sizes of trucks because of what they do with bridges and our highways, kind of crumbling infrastructure and all of those things. But what it really kind of hit home to me were recently, we were interviewing a leader for the National Association of County Engineers. And, I don't want to use hyperbole or anything, but, quoting him is basically saying, if you want to put heavier trucks on the roads and bridges, you're asking for some sort of catastrophe at some point. And that's where it is. This is, you talk about, these are the groups and people that know. And they're saying if we do this, it's not just something that truckers don't want or whatever. I mean, there's some definitely economic ramifications and all of that stuff to it as well. But this is a dangerous situation. The grade cards that that they put out for our roads and bridges aren't good. We've seen catastrophic events already in recent years regarding this sort of thing. Yeah, this is something that is really a recipe for disaster if we keep on moving toward that and trying to just make these trucks heavier and heavier, while also not really addressing the crumbling bridges and roads that we already have. So
yeah, I think that when it comes to heavier trucks, it's very much like the driver shortage myth, in that the only people who really believe in that are the mega carriers.
Yeah.
And even then, I think they understand it's a bad idea. They just can't say that out loud. So yeah, I can't think of any group outside of the mega carriers who would want heavier trucks. And now you have the engineers saying that, just kind of just supporting the how dangerous they are.
Yeah. So actually, this also brings back to so there was a House hearing in recent months where they kind of talked about this issue. OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh was on that. Obviously, it was opposed to heavier trucks. There was a representative kind of with the ATA that was for it, but and there was also a representative with the Teamsters that was opposed. And to me, this one was a little surprising, but also shows how problematic it is. Even the representative of the Truckload Carriers Association was opposed and saying how problematic it would be. So even sometimes some of those that you would look at as kind of the large carriers representatives that you would think might be pushing for this, even some of those realize the dangers that we have here.
Our next story, it's only dangerous, I guess, if you fall for it. And that's on recent scams of text messages coming in for unpaid tolls. I know I've received a few of these. The ones I love are from the states that don't even have toll roads. I'm like, people doing the scams, like, do a little bit of research. But Tyson, I know you talked about this.
Yeah, so these are popping up left and right. I know a couple months ago we reported one of the first ones. It's like, well, that's interesting. And then a couple weeks later we got another one. It's like, And then just every week there's a new one. It's like, what is going on here? And I guess it's big business, these toll scams. But you mentioned, most of these are coming in the form of text messages. But, one that we got recently, we didn't find out by a press release or anything like that. It's because I personally got an email from the Indiana DOT. Specifically, is from the Indiana DOT subscription service. And trying to make a long story short, I get their press releases and I get an email from a verified Indiana DOT email address saying that I owe money for a Texas tag toll, which I haven't been in Indiana or Texas recently. So something was weird. But the thing that caught me off guard was this was an official Indiana DOT email address. And when you look at the hyperlink for the Texas tag, it was texastag.org. But when you hover the mouse over the hyperlink, it was to like texastag-us.xyz, something like that. But turns out that the Indiana DOT email server got hacked, and that was from a legitimate. And so they're getting way more sophisticated and I almost got duped into it if it wasn't for the fact that I've never been to Texas recently. So, I mean, but to your point, it's like, you have to stay, vigilant with these type of things. They're never going to ask for you for things via text messages. So just kind of just be aware of that.
Yeah, nobody is immune to this too. Like Tyson mentioned, he got this personally. OOIDA recently received some of these sort of things. And, we're here at headquarters in Grain Valley, Missouri. And that was supposedly from Missouri DOT about toll roads. The only problem is Missouri doesn't have toll roads. So obviously we were on top of that. But a lot of people might not realize that even in the state that they're in, or you might just think, well, I'll click on that link and find out, what the details are, and then realize, well, now you've been hacked.
Shouldn't have done that, yeah. All right, good advice. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Our thanks to Mark Schrimmer and Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine. You can check out landline.media for all the latest in the trucking industry. And if you have a news tip, you can contact us through our website or call 816-229-5791. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. We'll be back after this.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Normally, a report by the National Transportation Safety Board about a wreck recommends some regulatory change or new technology that the board thinks is needed in order to prevent similar crashes in the future. But a recent report instead highlighted the need for more truck parking. Here to explain what's going on and why it's important is Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mark. How about yourself?
Very well, very well. An unfortunate incident that kind of brings us together here to talk today. But before we get into the NTSB report, I'm wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about this collision. What happened and what was involved?
Yes. So back in 2023, there was a Greyhound bus that was pulling in to a rest area. And along the entrance ramp to the rest area, as everyone has seen all the time, there were 3 tractor trailers parked on the shoulder because there were no spaces available in the rest area. So the Greyhound bus, the report concluded, as a result of a number of factors, one of them being a lack of truck parking, but due to driver fatigue and some other issues, unfortunately and tragically ran into those tractor trailers parked on the shoulder. That's what ultimately caused this crash and led to the fatalities in this case.
Now, as we mentioned at the top, the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, conducted an investigation, wrote a report. Why are they involved here? What is their role in situations like this?
Yes, and so NTSB, it's not completely unique, but it is sort of a special federal entity, and what they do is they investigate transportation accidents. So the big ones that I'm sure other people are also familiar with, involving aviation accidents, train accidents, anything else that happens, but also major accidents such as these that happened in Illinois. And what's important and different about NTSB is that it's an independent agency, so it's operates with more autonomy than other agencies and other investigating bodies that might be under the DOT authority.
But to be clear, NTSB does not have any regulatory power. This is correct. Investigate and recommend, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about their conclusions here. Looking at this collision, what did their investigation conclude in terms of why this happened?
Right, and so one of the issues I mentioned earlier, they did find that the bus driver fatigue was likely the primary cause of this accident. The national shortage of truck parking along the national highway system was one of the major contributing causes to the crash. So this is obviously not news to us, but it is, and obviously it's tragic that it has come to this, but this is a report and an incident that's helpful to illustrate the problem, because this happens quite frequently, and it's somewhat surprising that there are so many crashes that happen with trucks parked along shoulders, but most do not get this sort of attention. So very notable that they found the lack of truck parking as one of the major contributing factors to the crash.
And looking at that, normally when they mention something as a primary cause or a major contributing factor, they make some recommendations. So what did they recommend in terms of fixing the truck parking problem?
Yeah, it's not rocket science, and it won't be new to anyone listening here, but it is expanding truck parking capacity. So that wasn't terribly surprising that they made that recommendation. I think we all kind of expected they would make some sort of recommendation along those lines. But with that said, what is more surprising is in their presentation on the report, the NTSB and people participating in that presentation talked at length about the national truck parking shortage and why it's a problem, how it came to be a problem. And during the presentation, they went further about what should be done to address this. And specifically, NTSB Chair Hamandi, she talked about the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, which is the legislation that's been introduced in the House by Congressman Bost, as something that should be enacted to help expand funding for truck parking capacity. So it was very encouraging to see the NTSB specifically highlight the need for Congress to approve more funding to expand truck parking capacity, and really recognize that funding truck parking will be a major part of solving this crisis.
Just before we go on here, I think there is a significance to this in the fact I don't recall ever a time NTSB or any other federal agency has talked about truck parking specifically as a major contributing factor to a wreck, although I think everybody in trucking knows that there have been incidents where it did play a role. How significant is it that NTSB took this step of pointing this out as a major contributing factor?
Yeah, that is the one of the real big significant takeaways from this is that this really elevates the truck parking issue. Like I said before, NTSB, they investigate major transportation accidents again. So, aviation crashes, train derailments, all the stuff that gets major national news coverage. So for NTSB to examine this and highlight the need for truck parking, rather the role that the shortage of truck parking played in this crash is a big deal. But what was even in some ways a bigger deal than that is the chair of the NTSB calling for legislative action. Again, I follow NTSB, not super intimately, but it is pretty unprecedented for them to call for specific legislative action. Generally the recommendations are more regulatory in nature or more directed toward private industry to take certain actions. But it's a pretty big deal for them to be saying that Congress should be taking up specific legislation. So really, those are at least two big notable takeaways from this report and their presentation on it.
There was a note I noticed in the NTSB report saying that truckers can use personal conveyance to get to the next safe available truck parking. But that's kind of controversial, isn't it? And in fact, I believe CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, has asked the federal government to tighten up that personal conveyance rule. That's not really a solution, is it?
No, it's definitely a Band-Aid, especially the report and the conversation around the NTSB report point out that there's inconsistencies in how personal conveyance can be enforced, and the fact that there's discussion from CVSA about limiting personal conveyance just makes that even more confusing and difficult. So it really would be a Band-Aid to suggest that, and it just gets back to one of the frustrations that we have is there's so much funding that goes toward grants for commercial motor vehicle law enforcement. There's funding and other things that are done to help kind of everything surrounding the problem, but nothing ever done to actually solve the problem of a lack of truck parking. So our message continues to be help drivers operate more safely. Don't find workarounds. Don't be putting money in other places, but it's time to finally attack the issue.
And something else I noticed in there, and we just have a few seconds left here, but they talked about the ban on commercializing rest areas and maybe doing away with that. I mean, that's something that OOIDA has called for.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that we have long called for, and I think we've still certainly support that. I think our primary focus has been on Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act and dedicating federal funding to truck parking. We think that's the most viable avenue right now to expanding capacity. But certainly if that's something that Congress wanted to take a look at, we would be supportive of that as well.
Very, very interesting stuff here, Bryce. That's all the time we have, but thank you very much for the update on this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I've been talking with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. And folks, we urge you to call your members of Congress about that bill that Bryce mentioned, the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. And you can do that one of two ways. You can call your representatives by using the U.S. Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121. Or you can write a letter using the website fightingfortruckers.com. That's our program for today. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.